Days after the Michigan school shooting at Oxford High School in Oxford, Michigan, that took the lives of 4 students, Senate Republicans blocking a procedure to expand background checks on gun sales. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa saying the bill is hostile to lawful gun owners. The panel is back right now. The Democratic-sponsored bill would require new background requirements for gun transfers between private parties. Earlier this week, the president called on Congress to do something about gun violence. Take a listen.
Whether Congress acts or not, I'm going to use all the resources at my disposal as president to keep the American people safe from gun violence. But there's much more that Congress can do to help that effort.
Both to talk about the movies you've seen over and over again, this one, Lethal Weapon, we know how this story ends. There are now Democrats that are getting frustrated with the president because they think that he should take executive action to reinstate the assault weapons ban. What are you hearing?
So, I think that that's one side of things, and the president calling on Congress to do something is because he knows that Congress needs to act on all of these bills that are in a log jam inside of Congress. We do know that he issued that executive action on ghost guns earlier this year. He's had a full plate to his credit. He has had so many things back to back. But gun violence, gun control is something that should be on top of mind because it's something that is affecting Americans across the country. So is he doing everything that he can? He certainly is talking about doing more. When we talk about the assault weapons ban, though, from the 1994 bill, I do want to point out that banned firearms by names and characteristics, but ignored customization. So it wouldn't make sense to simply reinstate that same type of 1994 bill. However, a new bill, Assault Weapons Ban of 2021, hopes to address some of the shortcomings, some of the loopholes that manufacturers and lobbyists were able to do during that period. We know that 1994 bill ended in 2004, and there's been talk since then of putting something back in place, but there is resistance on the Republican side, as we just saw yesterday with the different senators coming out and saying, we're not going to support this, and they're talking about the Second Amendment rights. And so this is something that won't go away anytime soon, and we know that. But the president is talking about pushing and urging Congress to take more action rather than saying, here's what I'm going to do even further, because he did talk about executive actions, as I mentioned earlier this spring.
Christina, this is the bottom line on this particular issue. Politicians are afraid to actually say what the problem is. The problem isn't assault weapons, handguns, large capacity magazines. It's all of the above. There are too many guns out there. There are 389 million firearms in this country, which means we are armed to the teeth. And that means sooner or later, someone is going to get their hands on a gun and do something that nobody wants them to do. But nobody, Democrat or Republican, will say there are too many guns. So that being said, is this just another one of those endless movie loops in Washington where we know how the story begins, we know how the story has the middle, and we also know how the story is going to end?
Yeah, it does seem that way. I remember when Columbine happened. I was the same age as those kids. I was 15. I had just gotten home from school that day, and I thought, this is incredible. They are going to do something to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. And I have watched this same movie play over and over and over again for the last 20 plus years, with very little repercussion, with very little action from legislators, and with very little responsibility being taken. And I was hoping in this moment with and the NRA filing for bankruptcy that maybe something would change because their lobbying dollars wasn't having the same effect because they weren't able to invest and buy out legislators the way that they normally would. I thought that something would change in this moment, but it doesn't seem to be the case. And it's really disappointing to hear President Biden say, call on Congress to act as if he wasn't the person who could do something immediately tomorrow about this issue. So it's really disappointing that there aren't really real solutions, and that the best thing that anyone can come up with is some form of prosecution that tends to only really further victimize and criminalize Black and Brown communities. So we'll see what happens.
Tehran, I don't want to give away anybody's age. I learned a long time ago never ever to mention age when you're talking about women, but I was at Columbine in 1999, and I remember what it was like and how everyone demanded something be done. The children of Columbine now have children of their own. And what we're seeing in this country is an entire generation of parents who have grown up demanding something be done, arming themselves to the teeth. Is this now an issue that has just jumped the shark?
I don't know if it's an issue that's jumped the shark. This is we're using Columbine as the reference. I was a company commander at West Point my senior year, and one of my cadets was a Columbine grad, and his little sister was at the high school when that happened. I think it may have jumped the shark with respect to elected leaders, but even per our previous conversation, I think this is something the American public wants and needs a solution for, but for reasons that we all can't put together, a solution isn't being presented, right? I think the solution is simple, but the will of our elected leaders to actually do something about this isn't coming, and we don't know why. It reminds me of a conversation I've had with my mom since I first got involved in politics back in 2005, when she called me irate about elected leaders not doing the right thing, or however you would want to put that. And I would say, Mom, you cannot take your time to understand crazy. And to me, this is one of those situations where every week there's another mass killing at a school or at a mall or a nightclub, you name it. And we as regular people know what to do, but our elected leaders are not willing to do what we know needs to be done. And until they find the will to figure out what needs to be done, we're gonna continue to have these conversations, and it's frustrating. And to your point with the Christmas movies, right, over and over again.
Yep. So lest you think it's only Congress considered this, at the same time, Congress on the Supreme Court side could be getting rid of Roe v. Wade because of the sanctity of life. It could also decide to allow open carry in places like New York City, which would mean more guns on the streets of our country.